A very good afternoon and a very warm welcome to each one of you who is present here. Uh, I'm delighted that you all have joined from various corners of our country, and it's absolutely a delight to have all of you here. We're now ready to begin the session. Uh, and my name is Chirag Bhandari. I'm the founder and CEO at Ennoble Social Innovations, and I'll be your host for this session. As many of you are already aware that we are doing a series of webinar on some very critical issues regarding education. Uh, Today, we have some very eminent panelists amongst us who would be sharing their views on some on this very critical issue of how infrastructure is very important towards education. Um, to give you a brief background about Ennoble, because just to give you a sense of what Ennoble does, Ennoble Innovations is a social enterprise. It's Section 8 nonprofit, which is focused on developing high impact, sustainable solutions for the less privileged. We create holistic school transformation for government schools at scale through complete infrastructural revamp and engaging learning intervention under our flagship Yellow Green School Transformation Program. The organization is committed to transforming the education landscape of schools in rural areas at scale. Our work has been commended through several awards, including the Maharashtra State Innovation Award, Infosys R01 Award, CIMEX Tech Social Entrepreneurship Award, Mexico, also TSS Sustainability Award and Tycon Silicon Valley Social Entrepreneurship Award. We have collaborated with 70 plus organizations over the past 2.5 years of our existence. And our primary partners have been Mahindra Sustain, Godrej Agrovet, NTPC, Tata Steel, Gram Vikas, amongst others. Now, coming to the very critical topic that we have for discussion today, uh, importance of infrastructure towards educational outcomes. Now, just to give you a brief context of this topic before I introduce our eminent panelists to you, India is home to, the largest, I mean, second largest population, but the largest population in terms of children in the world. And we have estimated 43 crore, like it is 43 million children in age group of 0 to 18 years in our country. Now, these children are the future of our nation, and therefore it is imperative that they are provided with necessary means to realize their potential. We have a huge demographic dividend, uh, and a modernized education system can channelize, this energy, this effort in the right direction. Now, as you all understand that school is the smallest unit in the education system and is actually a home away for home for any student during student life. Most of students waking hour, they're spent in a school. Like, I mean, we all have such memories of school, and sometimes spending half a day or more than half a day in the school used to be a norm. So so the facilities, like, because we learn from various dimensions from the school, not just from the books, not just from the playgrounds, from teachers, from peers, so many things. Now, uh, building classroom, laboratories, and equipments are really crucial elements of learning environments in a school. And there are several studies and very strong evidence available that high quality infrastructure facilitates better instruction. It improves student outcomes and it reduces dropout rates, amongst other benefits. This makes school facilities and infrastructure a key element in a child's academic as well as holistic growth. It is one of the leading indicators, uh, also on the quality of education, because it determines the success of the education in so many ways. And on the contrary, there are other evidences also available where poor infrastructure can lead to lower educational outcomes, lower scores among students, uh, and hence providing for complete, like providing for completeness of educational facilities and infrastructure in school is a must, and it greatly influences the effectiveness of learning both in and out of the classroom. Uh, like, however, I mean, and despite this, the evidence that we have on how infrastructure can impact education and how critical education is to kind of reap the demographic dividend that we have as a country, over the last uh, 10 years, a lot of work has happened in terms of transforming schools, toilets being constructed, libraries being constructed. Uh, However, the efforts are not really matching to what the requirement is. I mean, we have huge gaps in terms of what is needed. We have about, if I were to give you some numbers, I mean, we have about uh, out of the total 15 lakh schools, if you would say, we have about 2 lakh schools which do not have library facility. About 9 lakh schools do not have functional computer facilities. About 11 lakh schools do not have internet facilities. And this is data as per UDIS that I'm quoting. And and then there are many schools where even electricity and drinking water and basic amenities is also a challenge. So while a lot of work has happened, a lot of work is still needed. And in the pandemic, we've seen how digitization is a must, how it is critical to have students be connected. I mean, not just in schools, but even at their homes digitally. And and there's a huge gap in terms of digitization in schools. And also, we've learned that how digital education can lead to more effective learning. So if we really want to improve learning outcomes, we need to digitize schools. We need to get students have access to digital education comfortably in their school environments. Uh, Also, uh, this entire infrastructural issue is not being able to deliver infrastructure is also an issue of equity, where where we have a certain section of our population which has access to some really good quality schools, and then a certain section of population which does not have access to this school. So it's a question of equity, because if you're not really providing the right infrastructure to students, we are really diminishing their chances of performance at the very beginning. And that is to a large degree unfair if we really want to again reap the demographic dividend and want fairness in terms of opportunity in our country. Also, uh, there is a challenge in terms of how community, how teachers themselves, and how students relate to education and the school environment when the school infrastructure is not in shape. So the impact is across on all the stakeholders. Uh, and hence it is really imperative that this conversation is started about getting school infrastructure organized, and at least get it up to a level where it is delivering, where all the schools are delivering on effective education. I mean, the best would be to have them be places of excellence where you and where we can invest, and then these places of excellence help us create people who are really contributing to our economy and society in a larger level. But I think the base minimum is to really have schools be delivering on effective education. And we as a country really need to do some work to get to that space. So, if we were to kind of design educational infrastructure in a way that it maximize accessibility and effectiveness in education being delivered, and we were to incorporate all this as a part of policy, and if we were to look at how funding can etc be arranged, that would be a game changer in terms of some of the challenges that we have in terms of our education sector. So to explore the ways in which we could ensure equity in education, we could ensure how infrastructure development can really impact learning outcomes, we have some very interesting and very senior panelist with us today. So on behalf of Ennoble team and on behalf of you all, I would like to welcome them. We have Mr. Vipul Shah, Head Education and Scaling, Global CSR, TCS. We have Mr. Namgyal Wanchuk. He is independent director at IRCTC, also on the board, and we also have our very own Pratmesh. So what we will do is that we will be I'll be taking you through their brief introductions, and then I'll be throwing some questions to them, and then through those questions we'll be exploring the various dimensions of the importance of infrastructure uh, in our country. So to give you a brief introduction of Mr. Vipul Shah, I'm sure a lot of you here would be knowing him already. He, like I said, presently heads education and scaling as part of TCS, Global Corporate Social Responsibility. He's focusing on imparting 21st century skills to students, especially from rural and underrepresented communities through TCS CSR program. Mr. CSR has initiated and heads ACM India Council Education Initiative, CS Pathshala setup, to devise and sustain initiatives to promote and improve access and quality of K-12 computing education in India. I've had the pleasure of interacting with Mr. Shah a couple of times before this meeting, and I think in the first meeting itself, I was blown away by the passion with which he spoke about education, by the passion with which his entire approach to how education should be delivered to everybody, and specifically scientific temperament building and STEM. I think that is one area where he's particularly passionate about. So absolutely a pleasure to have you, Mr. Shah, and looking forward to your views further in this program. Our second guest today is Mr. Namgyal Wangchuk. Mr. Namgyal Wangchuk, again, he's a very, very interesting personality. I've had the pleasure of interacting with him also a few times before this. And, he obviously he has practiced civil and criminal corporate law for about 24 years, has has had tremendous stint in his career at Delhi Bar Council, and also has practiced as an advocate in Delhi High Court. Very recently, he served as a Munsif judicial magistrate, and then he finally is representing central government at the IRCTC board. And today, through this medium, we will get to have his perspective and his views on the challenges related to infrastructure specific to Ladakh, where he belongs. And I'm very excited to have his unique views come out and be shared with all of you. And finally, we have Parthesh Pandya. So unfortunately, we were trying to have Radha Goenka today, but we could not have her because she was called into a last minute meeting. And we have Parthesh with us. But Parthesh brings a very interesting perspective where Parthesh has worked on a very unique concept called Anand Shala, which was a UNICEF funded project. And under Anand Shala, what Parthesh did was that he created a unique model which could then be replicated across. So I guess we get to really understand as to what went into designing and creating that model. If I were to introduce Parthesh further, Parthesh is the CEO of I2v Development Foundation and has been working in the education uh, for close to about 20 odd years. So tremendous experience there. Thank you, Parthesh, for accepting this invitation at the very last moment. And आई थिंक हमने पिछले वेबिनार्स में ऐसी भी बात की थी कि हम वेबिनार्स को सिर्फ सिर्फ अंग्रेजी में नहीं रखेंगे, हम उसको बायलिंगुअल करेंगे और हिंदी को भी इक्वल स्पेस देंगे. तो आपके आने से वो एक स्पेशल एलिमेंट भी ऐड होता है जहां पर कि हम अच्छी हिंदी सुन पाएंगे. तो थैंक यू सो मच फॉर एक्सेप्टिंग दिस इनविटेशन. So, and to kickstart the discussion further now, um, uh, Mr. Vipul, I would like to start with a question to you. And like there is documented evidence, right, that connects the lack of basic amenities, resources in schools directly to lower attendance among students, as well as high student dropout rates. Uh, Now you've had a brilliant experience of having this seen or having seen education, not just in India, but globally. Would you like to share your views and experiences on this, or how would you view this?
Thank you, Chirag. Am I audible?
Yes, very much.
Okay, thank you. So first of all, thank you so much for inviting me on the panel. It's a pleasure to be with on this panel and meet the other panelists as well. So thanks again. So what I'll try to do is I'll try to bring in a perspective into whatever I say, which also includes digital and how digital can shape and address some of the issues that we have. You spoke about basic amenities. So maybe I'll just use, since you mentioned example from experience, let me just share something that is happening. That's something that Andhra Pradesh government is working on. And so, I think all of you are aware that one of the biggest challenge in our schools is, especially rural government schools, is availability of clean toilets, right? I mean, it is quite critical to the extent that girls, when they reach puberty, 23, we have seen 23% dropout in schools due to poor sanitation. And either it could be due to lack of toilets, it could be due to dirty toilets. There are several challenges that they face. And this, as you mentioned, has resulted in dropout. There are many other amenities, other facilities. Maybe I'll just talk about this one for now. So one of the things that Andhra Pradesh government has been doing is they have been working on a scheme called, I don't know how is it pronounced correctly, but Nadu Nidu. And this focuses on improving the school infrastructure and ensuring hygiene by investing in water troughs and toilets. So the focus is on seeing how do we improve the infrastructure through its toilets, right? And is this something that can impact the dropout rate? And well, it's easier said than done because you're not talking about scale. Andhra Pradesh has 45,000 government schools. So just it's a huge logistic nightmare, right? I mean, just think about it. How do you ensure that if there are toilets, are these toilets maintained or not in the schools? Just collecting data itself is going to be nightmare, right? I mean, processing this data on a regular basis, that's a nightmare. So I think this is where a lot of technology, and that's what I meant by digital again, can come in and address these issues. So I know the system that Andhra Pradesh government is working on or they have built. They tried to, one of the biggest challenge again would be deployment. How do you go about to this 45,000 schools, deploy some special hardware? Who maintains this hardware? Because all said and done, one of the biggest challenges has been the maintenance of any devices, any hardware, anything that is kept on school premises, right? How do you manage that? So what is something that is easier if there is no special hardware required, nothing that is required? If one assumes that every person, every teacher has a mobile phone, can we not use that mobile phone to address this issue? So what they have done is teacher uploads pictures of toilets and washrooms using mobile phones. And now we're talking about huge number of pictures coming in, right? Every day, maybe multiple times a day. And so then this is where AI can come in. This is what I meant by saying technology can come in. And so AI detects and classifies toilets as clean versus unclean toilets and alerts people who are responsible for cleaning. They provide a dashboard so that you get reports on how many, on a regular basis, how many toilets are clean, unclean. And if you just think about it, the application of this particular idea it has immense potential. It can go well beyond sanitation. And think about it. One of the biggest challenges that you keep hearing about in the media is a midday meal, right? It's a brilliant scheme that brings a lot of students to school. And there are challenges, however, with it, right? In the deployment, a lot of our challenges are with implementation. So can we not use something similar? Infrastructure, again, can we not similar approaches, which are low cost, low maintenance approaches that could actually help us improve the infrastructure that we have in school? And I think what I've heard is that Andhra Pradesh has witnessed that the school enrollments have actually gone up, which is quite, I think, one thing that we have been seeing in the last decade or so is that the enrollments in government schools have been actually going down, right? People preferring to send their children to private schools wherever they can afford and in the vicinity, whatever they can do. But actually here, the enrollments have gone up and gone up by a significant amount. Over 6 lakh students have more students have enrolled. And more importantly, their the girl student dropout, that has reduced by 85,000 students within a year of implementing this, right? Which is a huge, I should say, improvement in terms of what was available and what is currently what is possible. It also tells us a lot that we just don't need infrastructure. We need things in place. We need mechanisms in place that can help us monitor this. And if we are able to do that with what we have, we can do more.
Yeah, I think you've very interesting example that you took of Andhra Pradesh, and I would quickly like to add, I have personally had a very interesting experience with Connect to Andhra team. So Connect to Andhra team is actually getting the funding done for Nadu Nidu, and for the first time, you would reach out to government people and they would not respond sometimes, but for the first time I was being chased. Okay, so there's a demand there. There's a demand there, and incredible work that team did in terms of getting some schools, approved and transformed. So yeah, tremendous work happening there. Also, I think you highlighted some very critical point wherein you spoke about not just infra but really low cost and low maintenance approaches to maintaining that infra in a certain shape so that it really delivers over a long period of time. I think that is something that we really need to give a very close attention, because while infra is developed and it is a one-time expense, but if it gets, let's say, if it's not maintained properly, then the entire purpose is lost. So yeah, I think we will explore this more in detail in a couple of questions. I would like to have Mr. Wangchuk also react to this question. Mr. Wangchuk. We can't hear you. No, not really.
Sir, you are on mute.
Now, can you hear me, sir?
Yes, we can.
Very good afternoon to all the panelists, as well as the moderator and all the persons or participants. And I am from Ladakh, which used to be a small, which used to be a district before the reorganization of the state of Jammu and Kashmir. And Ladakh was only considered as a district, and the budgets which used to be allocated to Ladakh was merely the district as any other district of Jammu and Kashmir. There are about 14, 15 odd districts. It's one of the district. It was considered as one of the district. And as you know that Ladakh, it consists of 59,146 square kilometer, which is a huge area to be administered, which is bigger than the state of Himachal Pradesh and Jammu and Kashmir put together. It is twice the size of the Jammu and Kashmir. So you can just imagine the terrain, the hostile climatic conditions, which becomes very challenging for the administrators to administer. Uh, and considering that the remoteness of the places, you can just imagine how spread out it is. It is scattered. So the Leh is the capital. So from Leh, if it has to be, all the schools have to be managed and administered. So you can just imagine the challenges that faced by the officials. And most important thing is that Ladakh remains cut off from the rest of the world for 6 to 7 months in a year. And people, they are used to stocking things for the winter. It starts from August till November, till the road closes. So due to the demography of Ladakh, the hostile climatic conditions, these are very big challenges. Like in plains, you can just, if you have to run a school, you don't have to think about the heating arrangements, because you have a very, I think hot climatic conditions, but you can use a fan. But in Ladakh, it becomes challenging because the temperature falls below sub-zero. And schools, the government schools especially, if I can just give you a number of schools that have in 2 districts of Ladakh UT, there are about pre-primary schools. There are about 25 pre-primary schools. Upper primary schools are about just a moment, please. Pre-primary schools are about 399 in Leh and Kargil both put together. Upper primary, there are about 387 schools. Secondary schools are 182, and higher secondary schools are 36 in number. And most of the students, they study in the private schools, unfortunately. And there are about 50,000 odd, approximately 50,000 students studying, and about 30,000 they study in private schools. Less than 25,000 they study in the government schools. Education has become a fundamental right. RTE Act, famously called, under Article 21A, the education has been declared as a fundamental right, meaning thereby that the state has the responsibility to provide basic education to the children. And as you have said that there are about 43 crores children studying from 0 to 18 age group. Just because we have stopped demanding, the allocated budget is only 6% of the GDP. Though there has been an increase, but considering the, I'm sorry, I'm just going off the track, because this is a general discussion, because you had asked me to give a specific in the context of Ladakh, but I'm just highlighting certain things. Why the policymakers, they don't make it an issue? Why the parliamentarians, why the MLAs don't take up these issues? Are these issues not important? 43 crores of children who are the backbone of India, coming future India. Are we not going to arm them? How are we going to face, how are they going to face the competition? How are we going to compete with the Chinese? Unless and until you fail to provide the basic education. It's not an election manifesto. The education and the amount of money that the government spends is not an issue. People, they seem to have given up hope, because they have given up hope from the government, because fundamental right, children are not given a basic. where there's a basic lack of infrastructure in the schools. The government schools, which are about, say, within 1 kilometer, there's a government school. Yet our children study in private schools. Why? Because in every village, there is supposed to be a village education committee consisting of the locals. But they are least concerned about that because their children are not studying there. Even the people, those who cannot afford, they go beyond their means and they put their children into private schools. Why? In our context, I'll just give you an example, sir. In our context, in context of Ladakh, what happens is that, I'll just give you one example. There's a primary school where there are about 3 teachers and 2 class 4 employees, total 5 persons, 5 government employees. And see how many students have been enrolled. There are about 13 children enrolled in that school. Kindly see how much the government is spending, but not on the infrastructure, only on the salary. And there's no accountability. You can just see. Everyone could have benefited. Why the teachers, their own children, they don't study in government schools? I had discussion with many of my colleagues. They tell me to, admit my children into a government school. I said, willingly, I'll do that. But first, you'll have to be an example. Why don't you do that? That means that you don't have confidence in your own teaching skills. In government schools, I'm part of. We also, as a society, we also run a school. That's a private school. I've seen we had very good teachers a few years back. But good teachers, they get selected in government as government teachers. And ultimately, what it means is that government has good teachers who are good, They get selected. But what happens thereafter? Why are the results in the government school so poor? Why don't children, they don't fare well? But there are exceptions also. One of the exceptions, sir.
Does infrastructure also play a role in getting these teacher demotivated, like infrastructure?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, that's what I'm coming to that.
Mhm.
What I'm saying is that I'll just tell you a small story, sir, which is a fact. There's a place which is near the Chinese border. There's a school there. What happens is that the children, they carry in November, mid-November, till December, the schools are, open. In December, the school get closed after, say, about 15 December because it's too cold. So the school remains closed for 2.5 months in a year. So what happens is that one of my relative recently, they told me that she's an employee in the Nyoma sector, which is near the Chinese border. The children carry water in bottles from a submersible pump, and they sleep till the morning. They put the bottles in. They sleep with the bottle in the morning so that the water becomes slightly warmer. Then, therefore, they can wash their faces. They can wash their hands. And there are good examples also. Mr. Sonam Wangchuk, he's a very renowned person. Everybody must have heard about him. He's a Magsaysay awardee, hero of 3 Idiots. Is supposed to have inspired by him. So when he was in Leh, I think many years back, he started an initiative, and he runs a society called Sigmol. And on his initiative, he has started a residential school. He had motivated the residents in Changtang village. The project the proposal, which you had forwarded, Ennoble had forwarded a proposal for transformation of that school. And because the reason why I proposed that school was that it is one of the pilot projects that was taken up at the initiative of Mr. Sonam Wangchuk many years back. But unfortunately, he was not there to continue that. And there are about 140 odd students enrolled there. 140 odd students. And it's a residential school. That's school is meant for the rural children, nomads, most of them nomads, because nomads, they don't stay put at one place. They they go in search of the greener pasture. So therefore that residential school came up because of the local initiative, because an initiative of the community, the parents, the teachers, everybody came together and they built a residential school there. And that residential school became a model, but that was never replicated.
Yeah.
So what I'm happy about one thing is that when you approached me, Mr. Chirag, with your proposal, I found it very very inspiring. I said that transformation can take place if you can help us transform that school. That can be a pilot project for the others to follow, because the infrastructure which I'm telling you is pathetic. There are no toilet facilities. There are no internet facilities available there. Forget about, because in the pandemic, there was virtual classes going on everywhere. But children of this place were deprived of that because there are no communication problems there. There are no toilet facilities. There are no water facilities. There are no heating facilities. One of the most important things is heating. There has to be heating facilities. Heating facilities are only in the principal or headmaster's room. That's all.
Correct.
Classrooms, they don't have any heating facilities.
So what I get from this conversation, sir, is that the challenges in Ladakh are to another level. I mean, like
you cannot imagine the state, sir, because it's the government. It is the government doesn't have a policy, unfortunately. Forget about vocational training. You don't have the basic. You don't have science teachers. Just imagine. You don't have subject teachers. What will the children learn?
So, I mean, when we were discussing, Vipul, how we are seeing transformation in Andhra Pradesh, and I'm seeing similar transformation in Orissa also, Mr. Nambiar, where Orissa government has taken up transformation of all their high schools and senior secondary schools, and they're really like government has directed all the district collectors to take up minimum 10-15 schools every 6 months and transform them. And a budget of 60 lakh rupees has been created by the government, state government, to transform those schools. So that kind of initiatives are being taken across different states. And I do hope, and it's actually, while we are listening to your story, Mr. Wangchuk, and not too many, we don't get to hear too many people and too many perspectives from that part of the country. So it's though it's heartbreaking to kind of hear this kind of difficulties that students have to go through over there. But I do hope, and our initiative, our initiative to transform a few schools in Ladakh is that we also want to create models where where we want to kind of showcase that we really want to build school infrastructure at the farthest and the most remotest locations in the country, and obviously and then coming towards city and transforming the
one of the issues, another important issue what I just want to project is that the many parents in remote areas, they migrate to the capital in search of better education for their children. Just imagine, if you can transform that school, you can reverse that migration. Hello?
Yeah, I think we lost you, Mr. Wangchuk. We lost you.
Can you hear me, sir?
we are having slight. Avni, can you just check his connection? And meanwhile, I'll just get Parthesh in on this. Parthesh, your, I mean, story of your, developing that Anand Shala and, creating it as a model also seems to be very inspiring. If you could just throw some light on that specific piece and कैसा मतलब how was it conceptualized or क्या कुछ आप लोगों ने देखा in very brief because I have a questions lined up. So
I will take hardly 2 or 3 minutes for here.
yeah.
And when we are talking about the toilets or the infrastructure of the schools, I'm just talking about the one of the experience and then want to conclude this. When we went to the schools and about the toilets or infrastructure and how we can rebuild this and how we can help to the schools. At that time, our main purpose is for about the hardware. But when we went to the schools and just surveying, we found there are something which is not good. There it was written in the toilets, and most of the people they also very much aware about in the toilets all the naughty things they are written in there. So we noted that what was that, and when we identify that, it was surprisingly it was not for the school or teachers for all. It was written for some of the teacher only. Now we identify how these teachers are teaching there. We observe them. So we found the connection. Okay, there is teaching methods. If we can improve their teaching method, it can impact on the hardware. See, there is a connection between hardware and software. Mostly when we are implementing any hardware, if we are not connecting any hardware with the software, that hardware itself is not educating. And when my hardware is not an educational material, then it will not going to bigger impact. Of course, the basic facility will definitely help, but it also require its connection with the software. So we started the mathematic training, and with the mathematic training also include the hardware. Automatically toilet getting used. Otherwise, very simple question if I am asking you, before 2014, the data was saying that there are so many houses in our country that don't have toilets. But then also people are going to the home, but toilets are not there in the school, then they are not going to the school. So there is something is mismatch in between. And what is that? That I think the hardware and software connection is important. So not only toilet, but even school buildings and everything, because whenever the ownership is concerned and ownership is there, then the building or any infrastructure getting used. So your question is about the attendance. Of course, hardware is getting affected. Because of the hardware, attendance get affected, but at the same time, hardware plus is also important. That is what my observation is. Over.
Yeah, I think very, very important. I think this is something that I also wanted to kind of highlight as to how the quality of teaching really impacts. And you also touched upon this other point of how ownership among students and ownership amongst community can also kind of really lead to uh, a installation of good hardware, which is infrastructure, and then maintenance of it. I think this just adds to what Vipul had highlighted, wherein we need to have mechanisms, being from looking at from a technology lens, he had suggested, like AI, and we can have low cost and low maintenance, kind of solutions there. But I think getting the community involved is also one key component, and having them take ownership, like having all the stakeholders having ownership is, I think, a very, very critical piece here. So I completely get that space. Parthesh, also I want to understand this specific project. So if you could very briefly highlight that also, Anand Shala, and what was that idea that you did in participation with UNICEF? You're on mute.
Okay. because there was a message that ki only host can mute or unmute. So I was writing there ki somebody can unmute me then and then only I can speak. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Okay, about the Anand Shala program is initially it was started with the Swachh school program. When UNICEF asked us to prepare about the Swachh, and it was in long back, I think I'm talking about 2002-3. So when they asked us about that, but when we went to the school, then we decided, okay, only toilets or the only cleanliness is will not going to help you or not going to sustain. So then we started the program called Anand Shala, and under the Anand Shala, we are covering entire educational processes in the school. When we are saying educational processes, it means there are 4 different domain we have identified. एक चीज ये थी कि स्कूल इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर ऑफ कोर्स, दूसरा था कि कम्युनिटी पार्टिसिपेशन, देन तीसरा जो था वो टीचिंग प्रोसेसेस, टीचिंग लर्निंग प्रोसेसेस इन द स्कूल्स, एंड चौथी चीज जो था रिसोर्सेज। मतलब मैं रिसोर्सेज की जब बात करता हूं तो मेरा कंप्यूटर भी आता है, बुक्स भी आता है, गांव में किसान है तो किसान भी आ जाता है। सो वो 4 चीज के साथ हम एक स्कूल का मैपिंग करते थे, एंड स्कूल का मैपिंग करने के बाद स्कूल अपने आप को विजुलाइज करती थी कि आने वाले 1 साल 2 साल में हम कहाँ जाना चाहते हैं, एंड देन वी स्टार्टेड इम्प्लीमेंटेड। तो हमने स्कूल में अपनी सब चीज, तो जैसे भी अभी वांगचुक जी ने बताया, बहुत सारे लोगों ने भी कहा और आज मानते भी है कि टॉयलेट्स हैं या स्कूल अदर इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर हैं, तो बेसिक मिनिमम क्या होना चाहिए उसके एक आइडेंटिफिकेशन किया। एंड मैं अगर ट्राई करूंगा, मेरा स्क्रीन अगर यहाँ से शेयर हो पाता है तो, क्योंकि एक फोटो में दिखाना चाहता हूँ। आई एम नॉट सेइंग कि माय फोटो इज राइट, अगेन माय सजेशन इज, आई एम नॉट सेइंग दैट। can you share this photo? This photo, can you see?
Yeah, you're sharing your screen right
Okay,
now. Yes.
so I think ये चित्र देखकर शायद ही पता लगेगा कि ये क्या क्या है, बट मैं दूसरा एक फोटो यहाँ से दिखाना चाहता हूँ, एंड विच इज इम्पोर्टेंट, एंड आप ये फोटो मैं थोड़ा बड़ा कर दिखाऊंगा तो आप देख पाएंगे। कैन यू दिस टॉयलेट, कैन यू सी दिस टॉयलेट?
Yeah.
ओके, अब मैं ये इसलिए यहाँ तक आया हूँ, ये टॉयलेट, ये मैं फिर से कह रहा हूँ, नाउ आई एम, मुझे लगता है कि मैं अपना स्क्रीन शेयरिंग जो है वो स्टॉप कर देता हूँ। अब मैं रिटर्निंग बैक, मैंने ये क्यों दिखाया, आई एम नॉट सेइंग दिस फोटो इज राइट, बट मैं जब पहली बार जब स्कूल में जाते हैं, बच्चे बाहर खुले में जाते हैं, टॉयलेट्स वगैरह, उनको बंद ले जाने में भी एक उसका एजुकेशन चाहिए, स्टॉप गेज अरेंजमेंट चाहिए भी इसमें। आज स्कूल के टॉयलेट्स के अंदर मैं देखने जाऊं तो उसका जो यूनिट बनता है, 3 टॉयलेट्स, 3 यूरिनल्स, 1 टॉयलेट और पानी की टंकी। अब 3 यूरिनल्स हैं, और बच्चे, कभी हमने ऑब्जर्व किया है जाकर ग्रेड 1 में बच्चे सूसू के लिए या यूरिनल के लिए टीचर से परमिशन मांगते हैं, कैसे मांगते हैं? एक बच्चा खड़ा होकर बोलता है कि आई वांट टू गो फॉर यूरिनल, जैसे वो खड़ा होता है दूसरा बच्चा बोलता है कि मैं जाना चाहती हूँ, तीसरा बोलता है मैं जाना चाहती हूँ। एट ए टाइम वो सब जाना चाहते हैं। पहली कक्षा का बच्चा, जब ये मैं इसलिए छोटे बच्चे के लिए बोल रहा हूँ कि जब वो जाते हैं अकेले नहीं जाते। नंबर 2, टॉयलेट्स आर और यूरिनल्स आर ऑलमोस्ट यूज्ड ड्यूरिंग द रिसेस टाइम, दे आर यूजिंग ड्यूरिंग दिस फ्री टाइम। अगर मेरे साथ एक साथ कई बच्चे के लिए इंतजाम करना है तो मैं कैसे कर पाऊं? तो एक स्टॉप गेज अरेंजमेंट जैसे ही किया, ऑटोमेटिकली स्कूल ने दूसरे साल बीच में पार्टीशन करवाया। लेकिन जब पहले ही पार्टीशन करते हैं तो बच्चे एक साथ तो छुट्टी अलग अलग तो छुट्टी नहीं मांगते, अलग अलग जाते नहीं है, तो उसका यूज होने के चांसेस कम हो जाते हैं। सो मेरा ये कहना है कि यूज उसका बढ़ाने के लिए क्या करना चाहिए, मुझे लगता है कि ये भी एक लर्निंग था जो आनंदशाला से मिला। तो आनंदशाला का एंटायर फ्रेमवर्क कनेक्टेड विद द 4 थिंग्स, बट एट द सेम टाइम हाउ वी आर गोइंग टू इंप्लीमेंट द प्रोसेस व्हिच आई शेयर विथ यू।
Got it. Got it. And I think one critical piece that he mentioned, Vipul, about resources. And while we are talking about resources, I just thought that we will just expand this conversation of resources. So you have been doing a lot of work in STEM and also in building scientific temperament and entrepreneurship among students. Wherein I know about this program wherein you are getting students to solve some community problems through design thinking. So when you look at your programs, do you think that this dearth of resources, like lack of labs, lack of computer availability, lack of this infrastructure, how does this impact your program, and also I know that there's some innovative solutions that you've created of not using them and still going ahead. Would you like to throw some light there?
Sure. No, so I think what was interesting from the earlier conversation was that a simple topic as sanitation, hygiene, toilet itself can have so much dimension to it, and so many different ways one looks at it, and different solutions that one can have, right? And this is just to indicate that there are many issues. There are many infrastructure at multiple levels. You talked about labs. You talked about other, I think so. Even the basic infrastructure that you think it's given in urban areas in the city schools is something that we have to really struggle for and to discuss at length on, right? So I think that was a very interesting conversation. Now, coming to your current question, I think this is very, just to set the context, I think you mentioned it in your opening remarks, but what we, as per the government data, we have less than 40% of our schools that have computers, right? I mean, and when we say computers, it doesn't, there could be one or two computers in the entire school, shared between what, 200, or whatever number of students that may be in the school. Well, even in urban areas, things are no better, right? I mean, you may have a lab there, you may have 25 computers, so the number of students may be higher. You may have 3 or 4 students sharing a computer during a period. At least you have a lab where they have access to these. But so computers remain a challenge. And then, even if you have a computer, I think the bigger challenge now in this connected world is connectivity to internet. And again, only 1 in 5 schools have internet connection. And that's a huge challenge, because if you think about it, how do they get to know about what is happening in the world outside? I mean, I'd like to just share an incident here. I was taking a training program for a set of teachers. These teachers had some background in computing. Okay, these are all computer teachers, though from government schools, rural schools. And in my talk, I brought up autonomous cars. I didn't say autonomous there. I said Google car and the likes of it. And then I asked people in the audience, there were about 40 to 50 teachers, as to how many of them had heard of this. Because when I saw their faces, I could figure out that they were not able to, that example was something that they had not heard of before. And then only a couple of hands went up, right? And so why is it something that perhaps every child in the urban area knows about? Why is even a teacher in the rural area unaware of this, right? If a teacher is unaware, it's unlikely that the student is going to be aware of the changes that are happening. And why does that happen? Again, it's a lack of infrastructure, right? It's a lack of connectivity to the external world, knowing about what is happening elsewhere. You don't need to really understand that. It's just something, the news that you'll be getting through that, the information that you'll be getting through the internet. If only 1 in 5 school has a connection, that's a challenge, right? But I think all of these numbers we need to take with a pinch of salt. Even these numbers by themselves don't mean anything, because electricity or uninterrupted power remains a challenge, right? I mean, how many hours a day would the school have power? And so all of this get constrained by the fact that we are limited in what can be done. And while government and many non-government organizations work on providing infrastructure support, whether it's through mobile or internet connectivity, I mean, going back to the point I was trying to make earlier, the maintenance of these devices always remain a challenge. If you visit any school now, you will find that the most principals or the most teachers will tell you, yeah, we have a couple of computers, but they're not working, right? Or you have 1 of them working, 5 of them lying idle because they're not working and they don't know what to do with it. There's no budgetary support for that. I think Mr. Wangchuk raised that issue in terms of what is the budget available even for basic infrastructure, but for it applies to everything, right? So all of these remain an issue. End of the day, technology is moving at a rapid pace, right? Even if a tablet or a laptop or a computer is donated to a school, within no time, it will be old in no time, because it will run out of updates that you get. It happens to your phone every time, all the time, right? It's supported for a year and there's no support after that. So given this, what is it that we can do? And I think that's what you asked me, what have we done? So I have several thoughts on this. One is the approach that we have taken, and which is pedagogy. How about focusing on experiential learning? Just because we don't have infrastructure or computers doesn't mean that the students don't learn computing, right? I mean, what is the foundational skills that we are looking for? We are looking at the 21st century. We are looking at logical thinking, critical reasoning abilities. Can we not build that using an activity-based curriculum? Can you not do math and science experiments with limited infrastructure? And computing, right? You would think that, oh, we cannot learn computing without the use of computers. And that's what most people will have you believe when you see all the ads about learning programming, etc. But we really don't, experts will tell you that you don't really need to learn or teach computing with computers. You can learn it without computers as well. And we have precisely been doing that since 2016. And I'd just like to give an example here. Since I mentioned about programming, there are, you may think that yes, it requires computing, right? But think about it differently. What is it that we are trying to teach in computing? What you're trying to teach a student is to solve a problem, right? How does the student approach a problem? How does he look at a problem, try to find a solution using some kind of a problem-solving approach, relating to past experience, understanding only things that are of importance to it? How does the student build a set of instructions to execute or solve that problem, right? What you could otherwise call as an algorithm, a step-by-step method to solve that problem, right? So there are a few concepts here that the student needs to understand. Sequencing, conditional, looping, as anybody who does programming would tell you. And you know what? One doesn't need, again, a computer to do this. We can do it in a classroom. You can have a very, very simple instruction set where you can say, okay, student is in a classroom. Now you can say stand, sit, walk one step, turn left, turn right, stop if there is any thing that comes in between, you turn left or right, and finally stop. Using just these simple instructions, a teacher can instruct a student to write a program to get up from his or her desk and walk to the blackboard in the classroom, right? Or walk to the door or to the window. And what can happen is, to make it further interesting, students can write these instructions. They can then do something like one student can act like a robot, the other, and just playing out what the other student has written in terms of what this is a program, right? And soon they'll realize what is the importance here, what they're learning. It's a precision that they are learning. One example I like to give is directions. When you ask people for directions, are you ever happy with the directions we get? Never, right? I mean, nor I'm sure are they happy when I give them directions. Why is that the case? Because this is something we have been doing for years and we do on a regular basis, right? But when you use Google Maps, we get very precise directions. I think what we are missing when we do the directions is a language and precision in doing that. And that is essentially the kind of knowledge or kind of thinking that we want to impart into students, right? These concepts that you can learn from your past experience, there are patterns that you could observe, and soon and once you start doing this, the realization would come that these are foundational skills and not required only for computing, but for anything that you do in life, right? I mean, whether you, let's say, learn car driving, you don't really learn on every model of a car, right? You learn the basic principles. There's a steering wheel, there's an accelerator, there's a clutch, there's a brake, and it doesn't matter, the make of the car doesn't matter, right? Similarly, all of these skills would help them solve problems, and that would problems that would be required for any profession, right? When you spoke about scientific temperament, Chirag, and as everybody would agree, data is the new currency. So, but how do we use data to build such a scientific temperament? How do we gather data? How do we train students to do that? How do we train students to visualize that data, model that data, analyze the data, build some hypothesis from data, test that hypothesis, right? I can give a simple example. We know that we see patterns, traffic has patterns, right? So can students not observe the traffic outside their school on, say, weekdays, in the morning when they get to school, in the afternoon, maybe in the evening as well, on weekends? And then can they form some inferences from this, right? Can they find that, okay, in peak hours, the traffic is higher? Maybe the data would tell them that. They don't have to really know this, but can they learn this from the data? The peak hour, the traffic is high. On weekends, it is low. On, again, holidays, it could be similar, mirror the weekends. Now, given this, can we ask them, okay, on so-and-so future date, we would like to plan to go from one part of the city to the next. What would be the best route to do that? And what would be a route on a different day, right? So they can map these things, and there's so much. This is essentially what scientific temperament is, right? Relying on data. And all of this can be done without any underlying infrastructure that is available. So while we are talking about infrastructure, there is a lot that can be done. This is essentially part of what we do as part of the 21st century skill. So this is one aspect which I said is pedagogy. The other thing I would like to talk about is community. There was a question on the chat window about involving community. I think Mr. Wangchuk, Mr. Pandya, all of us, the panelists also spoke about it earlier. And you know what? I think parents, they are the closest to the schools, not just physically, emotionally as well. Their children, the students, their children are learning in the school, right? So they are more invested in it than anybody else. So can we not tap into them? Believe me, we can. I have several examples, several instances. I can give you an example from one of the rural schools in Azila Parishad school in Maharashtra, in one of the remote talukas, where we were working with them, and the teacher wanted to give an online challenge, and only a few students could take it because they had limited computers. Electricity was a problem. So, and the students did well, whosoever took it. So the teacher, we need good teachers to take the initiative. He called a meeting of all the parents in the village and told them, you know what, our students have done well, but these were the limitations I had. These parents, and believe me, this was a village where these were largely landless laborers. They had very little monthly income. They got together. They purchased 5 computers and donated to a Zilla Parishad school. How often would you see that? How often would you see parents getting involved? And these are not parents who are rich. These are parents who come from poor, humble background, right? They can do this. One parent provided UPS to the school. I think as a neighboring school, the signal wouldn't reach the insides of the school. So one parent donated a system so that the Wi-Fi was enabled for the school. Another village, the Mukhya or the Pradhan, they had gone to his house because he had a computer to take this particular exam. So what he did is he enabled the same in the school, right? So the community can play a very, very important role. They can be the problem solvers. And I think that is something we need to tap into more and more often. I think there are a few more things. I think I would like to, I don't know, I've gone on for long. Maybe I can come back to that later. So I think I'll pause here.
Yeah, some very interesting points covered by you, Vipul. I think you covered a range of ideas from the resource. I mean, from what Parthish covered, and then I think having frugal solutions, like frugal innovative solutions, through which we can have fundamental skills be developed in students, and not being constrained by the resource availability is one critical idea that you spoke about. And also, I think finally your emphasis on how community can be a game changer and their involvement can actually be a game changer. And to just add, when we are looking at transforming school infrastructure, we look at a cluster and then we create one model school in that cluster, like that one model school, which is an inspiration to the community. And then we work with the community and get them funding sorted from their panchayats, from several other sources, and they have this one school in their vision which they know can actually deliver. And we've seen results coming out where they kind of manage funds from different resources, take ownership, and get their schools upgraded. So I think this is one very critical piece that needs to be looked at and that needs to be worked on. uh, we've kind of overshot on time, but I think I'll just take about 5 more minutes because there are too many questions being asked by. So we'll just kind of have a couple of questions be answered. Um, so, uh, just one very important question would be to um, to when we talk about all this regarding infra, the role of comment and our expectations with the comment. Are we we can obviously talk a lot about it and their delivery, but uh, how specifically we should be looking at the role of government in this for school infrastructure, and uh, your quick take. I'll just take about 1 minute answers because we're overshot on time. Parthesh, if you could just come on this, please.
गवर्नमेंट जो है उनके पास सबसे सवाल है कि मोर देन वन डिजाइन. For example, I'm giving an example in the Gujarat Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan. They have 100 designs of the classrooms. मतलब है कि मैं किसी भी गांव में जाऊं तो वहां के हिसाब से क्या मैं प्रोवाइड कर सकूं, तो ऑटोमेटिकली क्वालिटी बदल सकती है एक. और दूसरा मेरा सजेशन है कि कोई भी इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर काम चल रहा है तो टीचर को भी उसको साथ ओरिएंटेशन में साथ जोड़े, क्योंकि कोई भी इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर है वो क्वालिटी तभी उसमें आ सकती है कि जब उसका एजुकेशनल कनेक्शन हो पाए. ओवर.
Got it. Got it. Yeah, very, very precise and responsive. Mr. Wangchuk, very, very precise answer. What do you feel needs to be done here? You're on mute. Mr. Wangchuk, you're on mute.
Sorry. इसमें मैं ये कहूँगा इसमें कि जो भी इनिशिएटिव अगर लेंगे जी, इसमें जो है क्योंकि गवर्नमेंट का जो आपको पता है कि परचेज क्या होता है, सब स्टैंडर्ड चीज खरीदते हैं हमेशा. अब देखिए उसके बाद खरीदने के बाद जो मेंटेनेंस का नहीं होता है सर, एक इश्यू होता है. तो क्वालिटी चेक जो है वो सबसे इंपॉर्टेंट चीज है, क्योंकि आप जिस कंडीशन में आप उसको इस्तेमाल करेंगे उसका मेंटेनेंस भी साथ साथ हो, वो जरूरी है. चाहे इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर आप बनाएंगे, चाहे कोई इक्विपमेंट खरीदेंगे, चाहे अगर कुछ भी आप खरीदेंगे, तो यू मस्ट इंश्योर दैट उसका जो है मेंटेनेंस हो, उसके लिए प्रोविजन रखे, क्योंकि एक बार बनाने के बाद कभी मुड़ के देखते नहीं है. तो उसके लिए जो है अवेयरनेस जो है लोकल कम्युनिटी का भी चाहिए कि उनको जो अपना चीज समझ के इस्तेमाल करना है, और कम्युनिटी को सरकार ही नहीं समझना है इसको, तो अपने लिए यूज होना है. ये जो है लोगों में अवेयरनेस इसमें साथ साथ जरूरी है मेरे ख्याल से.
Got it. Got it. Yeah, yeah. I think whatever infrastructure you're saying gets created has to be top quality, and then community needs to take ownership of that infrastructure, is what you're suggesting. I think one important question by Samir Vipul, I don't know whether it has been Samir actually is a volunteer with us and is from Tata Coffee and is I hope you already know him. Is poor infrastructure a reason or willingness to send students to the school is a question. And then, of course, both of them are related, he says. And he's saying that do we need to work on the community first? Like it's a question of priority now. So do we need to work on the community first before really working on the infrastructure? Or what are your thoughts on that?
I personally agree, yes, with the community, because see, ultimately school, we are by law even, as a management system, school management committee and everything, the school committee is with the people, and if you are not talking with the people, then it's difficult. But unfortunately, by the system, by the government, it's not happening, because they are saying this much student, this much classrooms is required. Fine, in the government school there is a system norms, बट वो मेरा क्लासरूम कैसा होगा, कहाँ होगा, कम्युनिटी के साथ बैठकर कभी चर्चा की, एंड क्या डिमांड है वो कम्युनिटी कर रही है. मुझे लगता है मेरा तो अभी एक किसी ने सवाल भी पूछा था कि क्या आप अपने बच्चे को या गांव में पढ़ाने के लिए तैयार हैं. मुझे एक बताने में भी खुशी हो रही है कि मैं ऐसे ही एक गांव में रहता भी हूँ खुद को, कि जिसका पॉपुलेशन 500 का है. तो इसीलिए जो नया बिल्डिंग बनता है उसमें पहले से हम तय करते हैं कि गांव के लोगों की क्या जवाबदारी रहेगी, उसको कैसे देखेंगे. स्कूल की चाबी भी गांव में रहती है. नाउ सी इफ देयर इज ओनरशिप, आज मेरे गांव में स्कूल में दरवाजा नहीं है तो दरवाजा नहीं, लेकिन किसी की भैंस गांव के अंदर जाकर, स्कूल के अंदर जाकर वहां के जो प्लांट्स है उसको खा नहीं जा रही है. क्यों खाती नहीं है? क्योंकि गांव वालों को लग रहा है कि स्कूल मेरी है. So I agree, yes, कम्युनिटी को साथ लेना चाहिए, तब बहुत आसान हो जाएगा.
Got it. So, Vipul,
if I may just add on a couple of points here. I think there was a question on community involvement, right? I think my experience has been that they are very happy to be involved. I think it's just that there are not sufficient mechanisms for them to involve. We need to see how we can involve them much more, integrate them. Because what happens in typically the rural settings, you may find that many may not be literate, and there may be hesitation amongst the parents to really they may feel that this is not something they may be able to do. So if if there is a mechanism from the school to reach out and involve them in many ways, Mr. Pandya spoke about how the keys are with the in the village itself. Very, very innovative ideas, right? Now, so they are taking ownership, right? So I think if there is some way we can inculcate that amongst them and bring that, I think that would be helpful. One thing I've seen is that the hunger amongst the students in rural area is far more than hunger I've seen in urban areas. I think in urban areas, you'll find that students have access to technology, they have access to everything. So really, they are not looking for something more into do. They're happy within the whatever they're getting. But if you look at the rural students, even the teachers, and I was pleasantly surprised in all my interactions, because we keep hearing that we do not have quality teachers. We do have a lot of teachers who are very, very good, who are passionate, who are interested in bringing about transformation. It's just that they are limited by the system. They're limited by what they can do. They're limited by the number of students that they they're working with. And if you look at these students, they're just looking for opportunities, right? If we are able to provide those opportunities, they will do wonders. So I think I see a lot of hope. I think it is for all of us to realize and see what we can do to support that.
Got that. So with that note, I would like to just give all of you like concluding 15 seconds, your final remarks on this before we close. Like and very brief, Patesh. We've just overshot by about 13 minutes already. So quick 15 seconds. Parting thoughts on infrastructure. I know it's a tight one, but just
okay. Infrastructure, मुझे लगता है कि yes, it's a part of education, and it's go through the education process. It's simple, not standalone.
Got it. Has to be a part of education process is what I take. Okay, Mr. Wangchuk.
जी इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर आपने रिसर्च बहुत सारे रिसर्च में देखा होगा कि इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर आपका ठीक नहीं है. देखिए बेसिक जो नीड है, टॉयलेट्स जो है, there are cases of adolescents girls dropouts, बहुत सारे इंस्टेंसेस है क्योंकि टॉयलेट जो है, वाटर सैनिटेशन जो है, वो इश्यूज है. तो बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट चीज है कि इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर के बगैर जो है they cannot be a good schooling. क्योंकि बेसिक चीज तो इसमें गवर्नमेंट हैज टू प्रोवाइड.
Got it. People, parting thoughts.
Yeah, see, I would say that infrastructure is extremely important. Many studies have shown that they play a key role in helping student learning. Digital is going to be the future, and we need to ramp up the school infrastructure from the basic requirements to digital. However, I think having said that, we don't have to wait for these changes. Transformations can begin by just changing pedagogy, making it experiential, activity-based, and involving the community.
Brilliant. So with that, I would like to thank all of you. I would like to thank all of you to make time and be here and to contribute to this very important and critical discussion about school transformation and how we can have learning be imparted and how infrastructure is not disrupting that learning be imparted to students. So thank you so much, and we've had lovely panelists who've been very interactive on the chat. So thank you so much for this very active participation. We look forward to connecting with you again next month on another webinar, which could be related to the critical issue in education that we are facing. So by then, please take care. And Vipul, Mr. Namgyal, Parthesh, thank you so much for making time again. And
thank you so much for having us. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you. Sir. Pleasure to meet all of you.
Same here, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.